What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Level Up series. Now, today we're talking about kicks, and I'm going to give you guys some tips to level up your kicks. Now, before I give you guys some tips and hop into the computer, I'm actually going to preface this video by saying that we live in an age where you can get so many high quality samples. Like, you can hop on Splice, all these platforms. There are so many samples available that if you actually just do a good job at picking the right samples, you don't have to do a lot of processing. It's all about picking the right samples to fit within your style and your project and your song. So before you take a note of all these tips, basically you could just pick the right kick sample from the get-go and not have to do like 17 layers of all these weird tips. Let's hop into the computer and let me give you guys some tips on kicks. First tip of the day here. We're talking about parallel compression, saturation, and basically making a kick from scratch and making it sound good. I do this in sound design projects, and then I bounce out the kicks and use them in different tracks. But right now I'm working on this 808 trap type beat, and I'm making kicks and snares within this project. So this is like a sample project thing. Let me just play you guys the full track here. Sounds like this. That's it, super basic. So I made this kick from scratch, and without anything on the kick and the group, it would essentially sound like this. So basically, it's just a serum patch here, super simple. With all the processing, I'm not gonna go through everything because that would make for like a 30-minute video. With the processing on the channel strip of the kick, it ended up sounding like this. Lot better from this. Lot better. Now with the channel strip on the group here, which is basically the final, it sounds like this. And I also bounced out a less clipped version, which sounded like this. Super dope. Now, the main thing I want to highlight with this kick is how I made it knock. Basically, there are so many EQs and compressors on the channel strip of the kick and the group here. But what I want to highlight is, first of all, the black box is adding the smoothest saturation to the kick. Without this, it would sound like this. With. So good. So, also, the sub filter is a super dope plugin. I actually think this one is free, but you can use this to make everything like punchy. So this one, I put it at like 40 something hertz just to give it that low end. Without it, with it, you hear it. Very, very distinct difference in the low end. Now, another compressor, the Transient Designer, super dope plugin to make everything a little bit more knocky. Now without it, with it, taking a little bit off the sustain, adding a little bit off the in the attack here, makes the kick knock a lot more. Then we clipped the kick with a soft clipper. There are a lot of different plugins for this. In Fruity Loops, you have a clipper there. In Ableton, you have a thingy there. You have K-clip, standard clip, compressors with soft clipping. You have a lot of options here. But what I did was I soft clipped it to dB. Bam. So you can actually tell on the meter down here that we're clipping off everything above the line. So we have Isotope Trash, which is adding saturation. We have Panks, which is a parallel compressor by the Oversample guy. I actually love this plugin. I use it on my drum bus all the time. Basically, we're mixing in like 40% of a moderately compressed signal of the kick. Then we have this parallel compressor that I love. Now, if you hear it with full mix, it sounds like this. Overly super compressed. But if you just mix in like 10% of this, it adds a little bit more knock. I know it's a subtle detail, but it results in a better sounding kick at the end. Then I have some EQs here, just coloring the kick, taking off the high end. And actually this EQ is sidechaining to the 808 dynamically. So when the 808 is playing, it takes a couple dBs off the low end of the kick because it was clashing with the 808. I'll definitely be doing another video on sidechaining your FabFilter Pro Q EQ to basically mask frequencies and dynamically EQ different parts of the frequencies, because this is super dope. It's such a dope thing to do. One of my best mixing tips, to be honest. Now, another Transient Designer and standard clip as well. Now, the kick went from sounding like this to this. And you can take this off. It's very knocky, clippy, like hip-hoppy, gritty type kick right now. But you can take this off and it will sound like this. Super dope, punchy, low-endy trap, like 808 style kick. And it blends in well with the mix without the clipping at the end as well. Now for tip number 2, we're going to be talking about transients and layers to your kick. I love doing stuff like this, and I've used it in many of my tracks where I would essentially layer a cool sound on top of the kick and basically compress and glue them together. Now, I have a few examples loaded up here. This is the kick without anything on it. We can add a shaker layer. Super cool. We can add a transient layer. It sounds like this. We can add like a clicky transient layer. Sounds like this. We can add a stomp layer, which I love. I do this all the time. I record percussion at my mother's studio and I load it up here and use it as kick layer. So I basically take a sample, distort it, take the attack off it, and then we have a dope kick layer. So yeah, those are some layers. Let me show you guys another example actually. Now, here is another example of a kick. This is from my track I Do for my new EP. And this is basically the drop. And I want to show you guys a layer I did on the kick. So the drop sounds like this. Ooh, crazy. So on the kick, initially I actually just had this kick, which is basically a very knocky, clippy type kick. But I felt that without a high layer, it kind of missed something in the mix. So this is without the high layer. So I added in this layer. And essentially, if I took the EQ off it, it is like a dubstep type kick, but I really like this like simply high end it had to it. So essentially, I faded in the sample. So it doesn't have a clicky attack, but it has that high end. It is a little bit longer than the other one, but that didn't really matter, to be honest, because I took a lot of frequencies out of it and I put it with the kick and compressed them together. And it adds a lot more air to the kick in this track because I wanted the kick to have a lot of impact because there isn't much going on in the drop. This is the kick and the snare. So it adds a lot. And I usually do this like where I have a folder of transients I just made in Serum and I add them on top of kicks. Now this was a sample from Splice, I think. But I also do have a big folder of transients that I just layer on top of things where I feel like it needs to be more clicky, particularly in like housey stuff. I like how clicky house kicks sometimes, depending on the sound I'm going for. So it all comes down to taste, it all comes down to genre, it all comes down to like how big you want your kick to sound and how much you want it to fill up your frequencies. Alright, so for tip number 3, I want to be talking about mixing kick drums. Now, basically, what I always do in my projects is when I bounce out the final stems and mix the track down in another project, I will group all my drums together on a bus and basically glue them together with EQ compression, maybe some parallel saturation compression, stuff like that. But I also want to talk about subtractive EQ in here because this is something I do a lot of my kicks. And I used to be afraid of it. Like on my old tracks, I would basically use kick samples and not EQ them at all because I was afraid of taking out basically anything of the kick because I thought the sample was made that way. I don't want to take out anything. So basically, for example, on this kick, if you see my EQ on the kick, I basically took a lot out. I did it dynamically though, but if you hear the kick, it's a lot more boxy. And I find that the 2 to 6, 7, 800 hertz range is some place where I often take a lot out of the kick. Now, bear in mind, I usually use or make trap kicks, which are already like high cutted a lot, and doesn't have a lot of high end information. But on this kick, I took out these frequencies. Now, when you hear it like this, you would maybe think that, oh, that's the knock. Why would I actually take that out? But there is already a lot going on in the mid-range of this track, of heavy 808, and also the main filtered synths of this track are operating in that range. So I wanted to take that out of the kick because it made way more sense to have it in the synths. So yeah, guys, don't be afraid to do a lot of EQing to fit your kick to the track. It's very rare that I just pull a sample off Splice, put it in the project, and it just fits without any type of EQing. So definitely pay attention to that. Now, tip 4 is kind of a weird one, but basically, I want to show you guys my track for my new EP called Like This, where essentially, I have a very simple kick that I did not process at all besides the soft clipper. Kick on the drop sounds like this. So a very simple kick sample, and I didn't process it at all or add any layers. However, and the main part of this tip is, if you have interesting and moving percussion and grooves, you won't need a lot of kick layers. Now, let me play you the drop and I will explain what I mean by this.
Just tell me where it's at.
Yeah, this track is so crazy. Anyway, so let me play you guys the drums of this project because there's a lot going on. And basically, the kick sample fit perfect in there. All I did was some like drum group compression in the final mix project of this, and that's it. Now, let me play you the drums and the percussion here. So what you will hear is that there isn't actually a lot of clean kick hits. There is always some percussion going on. Let me just solo the percussion so you actually get a feel of what we have here. There is a lot going on here. You always have like small hat fills, some stuff to the right, stuff to the left, like noise, stuff on the kicks. So you won't actually need a lot of kick layers and stuff like that if you actually produce this way. I could do a long video on Like This and break down the project. Let me know if you guys want me to do that. Post a comment down below. Let me know. Anyway, if you have interesting percussion, you won't actually need a lot of kick layers. This kick's super simple. Honestly, I could have used an even simpler kick in this, and it would still have made sense because of all the percussion layers. So that's it. Now, people, I really hope you enjoyed this episode on how to level up your kicks and to see some of my process on basically how I do kicks and how I process kicks. Now, guys, these episodes are sponsored by Element Store, which is my own sample pack store, I know, shameless plug. But you can save 20% off any pack purchase with code YouTube. It's also linked down in the description. Anyway, guys, let me know if you have any questions towards anything I said or did in the video. And we have a lot more in store for you guys. See ya. Peace. Time to level up.